Now I hear you.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me try to get this a little bit bigger. Wonderful. Okay, so for our next talk, um, yeah, we have Bhavya Vasudeva, and she's going to talk about the implicit bias of Adam and SGD. Thank you very much for joining us, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers. I'm Bhavya, and I'm going to talk about my work on the implicit bias of Adam and SGD. This is joint work with Changwan, Vatsal, and Madhi, who are also all at USC. So the motivation for this work is that adaptive optimization methods are very widely used to train neural networks, especially Adam. But there's limited theoretical understanding as to how Adam works and why it's better than alternatives like SGD. For SGD, there are a lot of work studying the implicit bias. In particular, this seminal work by Sutri et al., which shows that for linearly separable data, gradient descent converges to the L2 max margin solution in direction, and also the later results for one hidden layer neural networks, where it's shown that gradient descent training leads to convergence to a KKT point of the L2 max margin problem, plus more results, um, which motivates the question that what is the implicit bias of Adam for nonlinear models like neural networks, and more importantly, how it differs from the implicit bias of SGD. So there's this recent work which extends the implicit bias result for one hidden layer neural networks to steepest descent methods, and this includes sine GD, which is essentially Adam without the momentum, and it shows that it converges to a KKT point of the L infinity max margin problem under some conditions. But one limitation of these results is that KKT points of these problems may not be unique, and they and how what do these results tell us about feature learning? What kinds of features are learned when we are training with different algorithms like GD versus sine GD, for instance? So, in practice, SGD trained neural networks are known to exhibit simplicity bias. So, they rely more on simple features, particularly in the presence of spurious features. For example, in this figure, there are like two features, and there's a linear solution that only uses one feature, and a nonlinear solution which uses both the features and has a better margin. And SGD trained neural networks were shown to rely on the simpler solution and learn a linear predictor. So here we ask if training with Adam also exhibits similar simplicity bias. And we find that Adam promotes more diverse feature learning. So in this figure shows some representative data sets and some metrics which measure some kind of feature learning. And we find that training with Adam usually outperforms SGD. Uh, but so in the rest of the talk, I'm going to give theoretical justification for this phenomena, and then also talk about the experimental results that I just showed in more detail. Um, so for the theory, the setup that we consider is binary classification using a one hidden layer ReLU neural network with fixed outer layer weights and with neurons denoted as W. And the data model that we consider is based on Gaussian mixtures. So, as shown in this figure, one of the classes is a single Gaussian cluster, and the other class has two Gaussian clusters. Um, and the label information is contained only in the first two dimensions. The rest of the dimensions just contain noise. And for the sake of completion, the gradient descent and Adam updates are shown as here. And for the theory, we consider the stability constant of Adam to be zero. And in this figure, we can see like one instance of this of the data where the base optimal predictor on the population is shown by the green dashed line and is non-linear. And we see that training with gradient descent learns this linear predictor, whereas training with Adam learns leads to this piecewise linear decision boundary. So this is the main theoretical result where we compare gradient descent and Adam without the momentum, so sin GD, in the population setting. And we show that with small learning rate and linear loss and data with isotropic Gaussians and in two dimensions, asymptotically training with gradient descent, the neurons converge to just two directions or just a single direction, depending on the outer layer weight, and only rely on just one feature. Whereas training with Adam, the neurons converge in three different directions and they use both the features. So this figure shows the numerical simulation in this setup. So the top row shows the data distribution and the evolution of the decision boundary over training time. And the second figure shows the neurons in the first two dimensions. And the colors denote the quadrant that the neurons are initialized in. So we initialize randomly and we see that as training progresses for SGD, the neurons only uh, converge in this direction, and this leads to a linear decision boundary, whereas for Adam, they converge in these three directions, which leads to a nonlinear decision boundary, which is also closer to the base optimal predictor as predicted by the theory. And then we also show that the predictor learned by Adam has a lower error as compared to gradient descent. And in the paper, we also consider um, the setting with momentum parameters tending to 1. And in a simplified data setting, we show that Adam leads to a more nonlinear decision boundary, which is closer to the base optimal predictor in this case as well. Uh, Now moving on to the experimental results. The first setting that we consider is a modified version of MNIST with a spurious feature, which models the synthetic data that we just looked at. And we train a two-layer neural network for binary classification. So the train set has one class as digit 0 images with a red colored patch as a spurious feature, and another class contains digit 1 or digit 2 images with a green colored patch. And in the test set, we flip the color patch to evaluate if the model relies on the color or the digit feature. So we find that the Adam training with Adam leads to a higher test accuracy, and we also evaluate agreement of these models with a linear model also trained on the same data set, and we find that SGD has more agreement, which indicates that training with SGD leads to a more linear decision boundary in this case as well. On the right, we compare the margin distribution of the models trained with SGD or Adam on the trade set. And we see that generally the model trained with Adam has higher margins, which also shows that Adam promotes richer feature learning. Next, we consider different group robustness benchmarks. So in these datasets, generally there are two types of features. There's a core feature which is predictive and also generalizes, and a spurious feature which is much simpler than the core feature and can be less predictive, but doesn't generalize on the under some distribution shifts. So one of the datasets is this waterbirds dataset, where we are shown like bird images, and the task is to predict the bird type, land bird or water bird, as shown in this figure. And the background is the spurious feature. So, for instance, most land birds are found on land, and water birds on water. So, on majority of the samples, the spurious feature can also be predictive, but only the core feature would be perfectly predictive of the label. So these types of datasets have imbalanced groups in the train set, but the test set has balanced groups usually. And then we consider four such datasets and then evaluate the worst group test accuracy. So we find that in terms of the worst group test accuracy, Adam training with Adam leads to much better performance as compared to SGD. Um, Next, we consider the dominoes dataset. So in this case, the images are like concatenated images of a digit from MNIST, 0 or 1, and an image from CFAR10, which is car or truck in this case. And the MNIST part is the spurious part, and the CFAR10 part is the core feature. And the train set has 95% spurious correlation, which is flipped during test set. In this case, we evaluate the decoded accuracy, which is we first train the model on the train set and then retrain the last layer by fixing the rest of the model. And for this retraining, we only use a group balanced data split. And we see that in terms of the decoded first group accuracy, again, we see Adam has leads to gains compared to SGD on this data set. And then finally, we consider Boolean features dataset, which is a synthetic dataset modeling the spurious and core features that are seen in the previous datasets. So here we have a d-dimensional input x, and part of which is used as the core feature, part of it is used as the spurious feature. So there are two functions, fc and fs, which model the core and the spurious labels. And if the spurious correlation is lambda, then these labels are in agreement, otherwise not. And in this case, we consider both the functions to be staircase functions of degree dc and ds. And we measure the decoded core correlation, where again, like after training, we retrain only the last layer to fit the core function, and then evaluate um, how often the predictions of the model match the core predictions of the core uh, feature-based function on the test set. And again, we observe that training with Adam leads to performance gains compared to SGD. So all of these results show that Adam promotes richer learning compared to SGD. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for one or two questions.
Thanks for the nice talk. So you bring indeed a fair amount of evidence that Adam indeed is better than SGD at finding features and also in the setting with spurious features. I wonder if you can comment a bit more on the mechanism that allows that. So can you say something about the intuition that makes Adam better than SGD?
Yes, so I think it's uh, at least in this very simplified setting, it's kind of more clear. So here the intuition is that, for example, in these two classes, like the dominant signal comes from just the first feature in the first dimension, and as a result, gradient descent just learns the linear decision boundary. Whereas for Adam, as long as we have like even some signal in the second dimension, because there's this sign, because like sign GD would essentially amplify the updates in the second dimension as well. So that enables Adam to learn a more nonlinear decision boundary. So I think that's the intuition for this setting. For more complex settings, it's a bit like harder to say what exactly the mechanism would be. Uh, but uh, but yeah, I guess through this, there's we can get like some intuition at least.
Thank you.
Actually, I was also so I really enjoyed your examples, and I was also curious about this one in particular about the solution that's learned by gradient descent, right?
Yeah.
Because it seems like a very simple solution in the sense that it really only distinguishes, in a sense, the two means of the two classes, right? But I feel like even a simple like linear discriminant already should take into account the fact that the red class has a much larger variance along the y-axis, right, and would kind of bend it over. So here, do you get this line with gradient descent because you don't have that much data, or do you think that maybe with stochastic gradient descent you would get a slightly different line, or yeah, do you have any comments on that?
I think, uh, yeah, I think like one factor can be, I think batch size could potentially make a difference. Like, I mean, like, I did try smaller batch sizes, but I still observed something similar. But I think one thing that made a difference was like a larger learning rate. If the learning rate is quite large, then I think SGD also can learn a more nonlinear decision boundary. I think that's because, uh, like here in this figure, we kind of see initially, because neurons are initialized randomly. If the updates are smaller, then they converge to just this one direction. But I think with larger learning rates, we still get like some neurons still converge to like some other directions, and as a result, we can get a more nonlinear decision boundary.
Okay, I see. Thank you. I don't see any other questions right now. So thank you again for joining us online.
Thank you.
And we'll move to the last